Welcome back, and today we're going to take a really deep dive into a tune from a guy who I think more than any other spearheaded that great British blues rock movement of the mid-60s through the early 70s. I'm talking, of course, about Eric Clapton, here with Cream, but he had been doing it for a long time previously with John Mayall's Blues Breakers. I think if you look at the big three iconic British guitarists, Clapton, Page, and Beck, you'd have to say that Clapton has been the most consistently dedicated to the blues over the course of his career. And real quick, before we get fully immersed, I just want to mention that this is another commission video. This is another one for Not a Cynic. So thanks to you for your continued support, both moral and financial. And if there's any others out there who would like to see me cover a particular topic, send me an email at mjerant.com and we can discuss the subject as well as a nominal fee. So hopefully some more of you will take me up on that. All right, let's go. So of course, any discussion of this song must start with blues legend Robert Johnson, who wrote and was the first to perform and record this song. Some sources state that it was part of his repertoire going all the way back to 1932 or so. But what we do know for sure is that he recorded two versions of the song on November 27th, 1936. Pretty cool that we have the actual date. And those are the versions that we know and love today.
I went to the crossroads, fell down on my knees. I went to the crossroads, fell down on my knees.
I love it. That's classic Delta blues style, played on an open-tuned acoustic guitar, but it hardly sounds like an acoustic, right? It's got this amazing metallic sound, and I think that's due largely to the fact that, unlike me, Johnson used a metal slide, probably a piece of pipe or something, which really contributes to that tone. It's really fun to play in that style. With the open tuning, you can kind of hit any open string you want, and it's going to fit. Crossroads is arguably Johnson's best known tune, mainly due to the fact that it's the genesis of this legend that sprung up around him over the years, that he made a Faustian bargain for his musical talent. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Faust legend, or if you've read it in any of its various forms, whether it's the Goethe version, Christopher Marlowe's play. But Faust is a man who sells his soul to the devil and in return receives infinite wisdom, power, all the worldly things. But of course, when he dies, the bill comes due. Well, the story goes that Johnson sold his soul to the devil at the crossroads to obtain his uncanny musical genius. Some of you may even remember back in the mid-'80s, there was a pretty popular movie called Crossroads, starring Ralph Macchio as a guitar player. At some point, he has this jam-off with the devil, played by Frank Zappa alum and guitar virtuoso Steve Vai. It was kind of fun. Of course, there have been many other versions. Elmore James is one of the more notable ones. But let's jump way ahead in time to the mid-1960s. Now, everyone knows about the Cream version on their 1968 Wheels of Fire album, but Clapton had been playing that tune for a few years before that, in 1965, while still with Mayall and the Blues Breakers, he formed a sort of ad hoc group called Eric Clapton and the Powerhouse, and they recorded a version of Crossroads.
I went down to the crossroads, fell down on my knees.
As you might have noticed there, that group featured Steve Winwood on vocals and Jack Bruce on the bass. It's a pretty cool version, obviously a bit more up-tempo than the Robert Johnson version, but a bit slower than the Cream version. And another element I noticed there that I like is the way the harmonica doubles the riff with the guitar. It's kind of cool. But of course, Clapton was not yet done with this song. Fast forward again to 1968, and Super Trio Cream, featuring of course Clapton, Jack Bruce, and Ginger Baker on drums, releases their third album, Wheels of Fire, with a sort of interesting concept. There were 2 discs, one recorded in the studio and the other live. And on that live disc was what I guess we could call Clapton's definitive version of Crossroads. By the way, Crossroads was also released as the second single from Wheels of Fire in January of '69. And an interesting little piece of trivia, the album claimed Crossroads was recorded at the Fillmore in San Francisco. Turns out it was recorded at the Winterland Ballroom, another San Francisco venue, which sadly no longer exists. All right, let's take a listen. So again, much faster tempo, and Clapton has really brought the riff front and center. Typical rock guitarist, right? There's always got to be that riff to grab onto. I love Clapton's vocals. I don't think people talk about them enough. It's always about the guitar playing. Typical 1-4-5 progression, A, D, E. Back to the 1 chord A there. Now, whereas the harmonica doubled the riff in the earlier version, now it's Jack Bruce playing right along with Clapton. And another thing that I think is very important and gives this particular version its drive is Ginger Baker. Note the way he hammers that snare drum on every single beat. Whereas a typical rock drummer might hit the snare on 2 and 4, this really gives it an insistent feel. Now, I want to take a moment and talk about a couple of more elements that separate rock from blues. All of you musicians will be like, oh yeah, of course, when I say this. But remember, not everybody has the same training. So when you listen to Cream's version, it's faster, as we said. But more than that, it's got what we call a straight 8th note feel. Every note is equidistant from every other note, very regimented. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Now, when you listen to a typical blues, it's usually slower, but it's got what we call a swing feel, which means the 8th notes are uneven. To be more specific, the rhythm is often described as long, short. Listen. And 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. It's that lazy feel that's characteristic of blues. Hear the difference? And the other big difference is the consistency and the time signature, the length of the measures, and so on. You heard me earlier when I was playing that Crossroads riff, and I was counting 4 over it, and it was just like clockwork. Let's go back to the Robert Johnson version and listen as I try and count 4 over this thing. It's what we would call free time. I mean, sometimes he'll extend a measure. It's like he's just making it up as he goes along. It's very cool. And obviously, it's much easier to do that if it's just you and you're not playing with a band. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. What? 1, 2, 3, 4. We're already just completely lost in the weeds here. He's all over the place. Now, looking into Clapton's guitar solo a bit, this is a great example of something all the best blues players do, which is they mix major and minor pentatonic within the same solo. This is a clinic in this idea. And by the way, I love the whole power trio vibe here. There's no rhythm guitar to fill in. When Clapton enters his solo, he completes the riff, he pops that open A string, lets it ring for half a bar, and then just goes to town. That was all A major stuff. Notice how the major pentatonic gives this kind of upbeat, very country blues kind of feel. Right? Love these little double stops here. Kind of works his way right down this little A major chord. And from there, we shift into minor mode. You should hear a change in mood now. Did you feel it? That was all minor. It got kind of mean and dirty sounding there for a moment. Now we're going to slide up into a nice little major triad. So that brightens it up again just for a second. Now it's minor again. Some more cool little double stops here. And minor. This is one of those cases where today it's tempting to look back on this and go, yeah, that's pretty cool, but whatever. It's just a rock guy doing, a typical blues jam. But we have to remember that people weren't really doing this in rock at the time. It's the improvisation, the tone. There was a guy that managed a music store I used to teach out of. He was a huge Clapton fan. And I remember one time he said, the great thing about Clapton, he was the first. He was the first guy that took a Les Paul, plugged it into a Marshall, and just went off. And if you think about it, he really was. Even before Hendrix and guys like that, there was Clapton. There were certainly other British bands playing blues around this time. One example, the Stones put out their Beggar's Banquet album in the same year that Wheels of Fire came out. And if you're familiar with Beggar's Banquet, that album contains some great blues, very authentic sounding, both some Delta blues and Chicago-style blues. But that's just the point. The Stones really sound more like they're trying to emulate note for note their heroes. But Clapton and Cream came up with something else. It was a real synthesis of different styles. Clapton eschews the slide guitar from Johnson's original and distills it into that insistent single note riff. And when he solos, his approach is much more like that of, say, a B.B. King or an Albert King than what Robert Johnson would do. You've got the improvisational element. This song often stretched much longer in live performances, which is kind of a jazz influence. Obviously, the hard rock influence is there. And even lyrically, Clapton pulls a line from another old blues classic, Travelin' Riverside Blues. I'm going down to Rosedale, take my rider by my side. You can still barrel house baby on the riverside. In spite of the fact that this song has been so influential on not only rock guitar, but rock music in general, Clapton has never been a big fan. He's mentioned this several times in interviews. Here's just one example. He says, I certainly put that one to bed quickly. I actually have about zero tolerance for most of my old material, especially Crossroads. The popularity of that song with Cream has always been mystifying to me. So there it is. Obviously not one of Clapton's favorites, but fans and critics alike have heaped praise on this song for decades now, and it remains a landmark recording in the history of rock music. As usual, I want you all to tell me what you think in the comments. Thanks for hanging out to the end. If you like what you're seeing here, please consider a financial contribution. Buy me a coffee, PayPal, and other options which you can find if you go to the description of the video. Thanks as always, and talk soon.